An ugly story from our Talmud. Rabbi Eliezer was a gaon, meaning like a super smart, wise rabbi. And he was leaving Torah study, where he had done really well. He had asked like really good questions. He made like wonderful comments where people went, Like he was feeling really good about himself. So he was traveling home on his high horse, and he saw a man on the side of the road who, our Talmud says, this is a direct quote, he was an exceedingly ugly man. Rabbi Eliezer looks at him and says, "You worthless person, how ugly can you be?" Oof. The man looks up at Rabbi Eliezer and says, "Sir, why don't you go to my craftsman, God, and tell my craftsman that the vessel they created is defective?" Oof. We've been there. God willing, we have not called anyone worthless, and hopefully we haven't called anyone ugly to their face. But we have been in situations where we try to call out someone else's ugly, only to realize that it's ours that seeped out. When I think about my ugliest behaviors at the ugliest times in my life, my teenage years come to mind. I'm kind of a rare breed of rabbi, as that I was a cool girl in high school. And not just a cool girl, unfortunately, but a mean girl. We did not have a burn book, but that's about where the movie satire ended and my life began. I was so full of insecurity that I would quickly call out someone else's just in case they were even going to breathe the idea that I had some of my own. Years later, in seminary, it was my first year of seminary, and fortunately, someone else from my high school was in my class. And we had become reacquainted. We were out, after like 2 months of all of us being together, we were out for one night, and she turned to me, and she said, "So, you're like nice now, huh?" Yeah. Yeah. Just like the exceedingly ugly man did for Rabbi Eliezer, she held up a mirror to my ugly, and it was not pretty. We let our ugly come out. It happens. But then what do we do with our ugly? The Talmud is not the only Jewish canon that has ugly passages within it. I share with you an ugly passage from the Torah that I stumbled upon actually this spring as I was preparing for a Shabbat sermon, and it shocked me. I don't actually have the Torah memorized, just so you know. The rabbis and cantors don't have it memorized. It still shocks us sometimes. And I thought about bringing it for that Shabbat, but I felt like that passage, it was too ugly for Shabbat. And so I'm bringing it to you today. It's in Numbers. The Israelites have gone to war with the Midianites, and they were successful. They did a good job. And the Israelites are coming back into the camp. Moses goes out to greet them excitedly, congratulating them, and then he sees that they are being followed by the Midianite women and children. Moses becomes enraged. Incensed, he runs out to the Israelites and says, "How dare you? How dare you not kill the women and children too?" How dare you not kill the women and children too? This is our prophet, the prophet, the one who sees God face to face, the one who we are supposed to admire for his humility. And that's his question? How did you not kill the women and children too? It's ugly. Now, this sermon could pretty quickly veer into the political realm. It's not going to, but I do think that that is why this passage spoke to me in the spring. There has been a lot of ugly this year. There has been a lot of ugly in this war. And to be honest, I don't admire Hamas and Hezbollah. I really admire Israel. I admire Israel the way that I admire Moses. I love Israel the way I love Moses. And so there does feel like a parallel here where I don't know what to do with that ugly, the ugly of war that may be justified but is still ugly. As Rabbi Nama Daphne Kellen said from our sister congregation in Haifa when she visited just a few months ago, all war is immoral. We just have to figure out what to do with it. I don't know what to do with that ugly. I don't work for the State Department. Half of you do. I do know what to do. I do know what to do with my ugly, with our personal ugly, and I believe that that's what Yom Kippur has called us to focus on this morning. So what do we do with our ugly? Well, the Israelites carried out Moses' commands. And our ancient commentators take a pretty obvious approach to ugly. It's what we all do with our ugly behaviors. They sweep it under the rug. Our ancient commentators focus on the verse, and they pull out a grammatical error in the verse. They notice that Moses uses the verb to kill twice and asks, why? Why do that? As if it's not obvious that Moses was saying, seriously, go kill them. Our ancient commentators miss the moral forest for the grammatical trees. We do this too. We focus on wordplay. We focus on the way someone else's actions have justified our own. We focus on the details when we sort of miss the fact that we haven't acted the way we want to act. Our modern commentators take a different approach. Not unanimously, but again and again, they use the same word to discuss this passage, the word that I have used again and again. Here is an ugly passage from Torah, they say. But they then point out that Moses and the Israelites deal with their ugly. They lay out a 3-step process for what to do when our ugly comes out. And perhaps this 3-step process can help us with our ugly as well. So first, after the Israelites return again from their war, Moses commands them to leave the camp and to take bounded time, to take 7 days outside of the camp, then to purify themselves in a ritual bath and come back. They've been through a lot of wars. This is the first time Moses tells them to go and take time away, to go and sort of sit with what they've done, even though they were commanded to do it. They take bounded time to sit and name their ugly. There's a show that came out, I think a few years ago, called Shrinking. It's really good, Jason Segel. And it deals with a family who's mourning the loss of a mother. And the teenage girl is acting out, understandably. Continues to act out, continues to yell. And her therapist recommends that she takes 15 minutes every day, set a timer on her phone, 15 minutes every day, and put on a really tearjerker song, and sit and cry and scream for 15 minutes to yell at her mom, who, not by her choice, but left her, yell at her dad, who is struggling to be a dad in this moment, yell at everyone she needs to yell at. The timer goes off, she wipes her face, and she goes on with her day. What would it be like if we took, maybe not 15 minutes, 5 minutes every day to sit with our ugly, to think about the things we've done the day before, and figure out how we want to maybe, and actually not to figure it out, just to name it for 5 minutes. Yom Kippur is that bounded time for us. It's 25 hours where we sit with our ugly, where we sit naming the things that we have done this year of which we are not proud. Just by naming it, we own it. The Israelites and Moses don't stop there, though. When the Israelites come back to the camp, they hand over all of their spoils of war to Moses. They say, "We don't want it. You take it." They don't benefit from their ugly. Rabbi Danya Rettenberg wrote a book called On Repentance and Repair, where she talks about how when we make amends after we mess up, we can't benefit from those amends. Often in our society, when we hurt somebody, we go over to them and say, well, God willing, we go over to them and say, "I'm sorry." But actually what Rabbi Rettenberg shares is that's actually a pretty egotistical thing to do after you've hurt someone. It's all about you. You've just hurt them, and then you go to them and say, "I'm sorry," and the burden is on them to forgive you. Instead, she says, say sorry if you want, because that's what our society tells us to do, but it better be followed up with, what do you need? What do you need in order to heal? I've hurt you. What do you need in order to feel better? How can I make this better? This is actually a practice that my family has instilled in my children, and it does kind of work. I need a hug. I need you to not hit me again. I need you to not knock down my tower, right? It allows people to advocate for themselves in a way that's really empowering. The last thing that Moses and the Israelites do after this episode is Moses takes that silver and gold, takes the spoils of war, and sets up what is called a zikaron, a remembrance. Sets up a remembrance of, puts it away like a shrine, kind of. This word, zikaron, comes up a few times in the Torah for usually our holiest objects. There's a zikaron in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle. There is a zikaron in our tefillin, that leather that we wrap on our arms or around our head, kind of like a mezuzah as well. A zikaron, it seems, is an extremely holy object made to remind ourselves of the holiness and the connection we have with God and with our people. And here Moses is, taking the spoils of war, taking the spoils of ugly, and creating a zikaron, creating a remembrance. We too can create a zikaron. We can write down our ugly to remind ourselves. I was once in a craft fair, and I saw an image, a print, of a woman with her arms stretched out, and across it, it says, "One day she decided to forgive herself." It's a pretty powerful zikaron. I bought it. I have it up next to my jewelry, and I look at it every day as a reminder that there's ugly in me, and also that I don't need to beat myself up over that. I can continue to take these steps. We can continue to take these steps to turn our ugly into beauty, to turn our ugly into holy. If these steps sound perhaps familiar to you, thousands of years after the Torah was codified, our biggest rabbi, doctor, philosopher, scientist, Maimonides, codified the steps for teshuvah, the steps for repentance that we did today, and they are exactly these steps. Name your sin. Make amends. Make sure that when you're faced with the same problem again, you don't do the same thing. Moses and the Israelites did it a little bit differently years later. Maimonides codified it in around the year 1200. We get to live it. Rabbi Eliezer, that rabbi who let his ugly out, actually did a pretty good job of repentance after that moment. The story's pretty good. He asked for forgiveness. He even went and talked to his students about it and taught them how to be better people. Would have been a really good ending to this sermon. It was good. But I'm more interested in what Rabbi Eliezer would have said to the craftsman. What would Rabbi Eliezer have said if he had gone to God? Rabbi Eliezer would have approached God and said, "I messed up. I let my ugly out. I called one of your creations worthless. I don't know what to do with that." God, having a lot of foresight, I believe, would say, "Here are the steps of teshuvah," but would also say, "Eliezer, we all have ugly within us. Even Moses, our most esteemed prophet, acted with his ugly. Even our Jewish canon, our Talmud, and our Torah have ugly within it. Even our rabbis and cantors and Torah scholars and leaders have ugly within them. Even me, the Holy One, even I, God would say, even I get angry, get jealous, and act in violence and hurt people physically and emotionally throughout our Torah. God would say to Rabbi Eliezer, you are created b'tselem Elohim. You are created good, but that also means you are created with a little bit of my ugly. We don't need to beat ourselves up over that. We need to name it, and then we can transform it. We can transform our ugly into beauty. We can transform our ugly into holy. Gemar Chatima Tova.
We are good, we are flawed, we are the breath of an imperfect God. We are good, we are flawed, we are the breath of an imperfect God. I